This is November 19, 2022, and I have here Arny Lippin in Brooklyn, and I'm making a short video. Arny is a unique group member, and the kinds of things he says are always unique, and they're not like what other people say. So I just thought I'd make a video of him. Arny, go ahead.
Yeah, well, we had that incident last week where you were trying to get your Zoom to work, and you couldn't get it to work properly, and somebody else got a different program working, and the dream group took place, but you tried to get in and you couldn't get it. You couldn't get it to work from your point of view, and I had already left because you said you couldn't get it to work, and this dream group is all over the world. So you're doing it at in the mid afternoon around 12 o'clock, and I'm 12 o'clock at night here in the U.S. So when I saw you said you couldn't do it, I just turned my computer off, and I assumed 5 minutes later Charlie set something else up. But anyway, what was interesting about that, or emblematic of the dream group itself, really, was that even though you're sort of the guide in this, and you're now getting other people to be the leader, to run the dream group, you're still present all the time, and periodically jump in and give it a little nudge this way or that way, and so your presence is very valuable. But it actually wasn't necessary. The structure of the dream group makes it work almost without anybody, except somebody has to say, "Okay, are we ready to move on to the next stage?"
I just want to make a point here. Is that I think you're right. I think let me just tell a brief episode. A few years back, I had a Ullman Dream Group community of practice in my apartment in New York City, and I invited people from around the world. And this woman from Finland wanted to. She was talking about having a leaderless dream group, and she wanted to do the dream group in a leaderless way. I was opposed to that, but I just kept quiet. And she did that, and it didn't work. And the fact is, Montague Ullman is right in the way he set this up. The dream group needs a leader, but the funny thing is, exactly like what you say, this is a leaderless process, really. And so in order to have a leaderless dream group, you need a leader who will sort of keep people from breaking the rules, but not
exactly
enough control of the dream group.
Yes, no, exactly. I mean, the dream group itself, it can run itself because it tells you it tells you what you're supposed to do, and as you just said, exactly, that sometimes people stray from the path because the dream group is very adamant and specific about the fact that the dreamer, only person who can interpret the dream, is the dreamer, because it's the dreamer's dream. And what often happens is, and we all tend to fall into the mistake of telling the dreamer what the dream means.
No, we don't want to do that.
And that's what we don't want to do.
No.
But we all have that tendency to do that. And so it's good to have somebody who's sort of sitting a bit on the outside and saying, hey, wait a minute, you went too far, and then you back off and you move ahead. Otherwise, the whole thing can get disrupted.
Oh, yeah.
And also occasionally, one of the sections of it merges into another section, and that happens with certain people. And Maria, who's in our group, she often when we do certain sections, she often just starts free associating into parts of her life, which actually usually come in later in the dream group, but she reveals all that stuff up front, and it sort of trickles out. And then we get to the context, and saying, well, what's happening in your life? She's already told you all that. But
when you're the dreamer, Arny, when you're the dreamer, that's okay, because the truth is, the dreamer can say whatever she wants, and dreamers frequently give context in their dreamer's response to the game. This happens. Maria is not unusual. She's just very open and free about it,
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say, Arny, before we move on, and I of course I agree with all the rules of the process, and we really try to play by the rules. but I find that it makes a better dream group if we're not sticklers. In other words, if someone goes off or does something, if you
It
know
might be a good contribution. It might be a good contribution, and you just let it go. Yeah.
Exactly. When we get off the process, we're on the process. It's funny. It's a creative process, and you have to be a little bit free with it. You allow people a little bit of leeway. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, but also, yeah, also people might get, they might pull back if they made a mistake. Actually, what I really wanted to say was that the group this particular group that I'm in with you, and I know you have other groups that you do, it's quite a seasoned group, and we've been together for almost a year and a half, maybe coming on 2 years. So it really moves along pretty smoothly, and I almost feel as though we can stretch outside some of the parameters, because we still stay within the basic. We still all understand, and occasionally. So that's the other element. I think if you're starting out with a new group, you have to be maybe a little more stickly, so that people get in their heads that it's the dreamer's dream, not your dream.
I'm going to tell a little episode. We had a guy from Australia. He came in, and I don't know what his problem was, but he seemed to want what it is. There's something like, for example, let me go off the topic a minute. This Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book, and about and in that he wrote about this tennis player who was at the Opens, and I think it was in England, and she suddenly sort of froze. They have a name for it, because instead of just playing spontaneously like we do, because we are a group of masters. Everyone in this group is really a master at the process. You yourself, most of all, and we do things intuitively. We don't go back to the basic rules, because if we did that, we'd get stuck, and it's an inferior approach. It's a left brain approach, whereas what we do is more of a right brain approach. So, well,
it's like playing music. If you're playing music and then you start thinking about what you're playing, you can't play it anymore.
Go by the rules and you're finished,
Yeah, if you start thinking, you're done. you're frozen, because you can't. And you know what? What it tells you is that you can't multitask. That's bullshit.
You can't what?
You can't really multitask. You can't do two things at the same time. Well, yeah. And there's all this multitasking stuff. I think it's being debunked finally. But it's the same kind of thing. You can't do two things at once. If you're going to do something, you've got to be there doing it. And this dream group works that way, and it's been quite rewarding for everybody in it. And you can see that the people are so pleased to be in it, and they're so thankful. And after each session. And the other thing that since this is just about dream groups, the other thing that always amazes me, or not anymore, because I see that it happens, is that people somehow, the structure of the group and the way that it's set up, everyone feels comfortable about saying the most intimate and potentially embarrassing things about themselves with complete peace and trust. There's an enormous trust that has been in all the groups that you've run, and I think part of that is because you're not allowed to tell the other person what to think, and so there's no judgment in any of this. It's all trying to figure out help the dreamer figure out look into themselves and figure out what's going on, and so that's the other beautiful thing about the dream group. There's complete trust, and there's no judgment. And I don't know that you find that too. Well, this is the only group I've been in, so maybe you have it in other groups too. It's important.
This is my only group.
Well, don't you? But you've taught many of these groups. at the university, and
do lead a dream group class at the university. Yeah, those are different people. Those are beginners. Those are, freshmen, sophomores.
But you still have to have this trust. I mean, you have to establish this trust, otherwise it won't work.
It's true. But last week in the dream group class at the university, the student, I asked her a question, and she said, I don't want to say anything about that. She said it's too intimate, and it was about the relationship between her and a friend of hers from early school years. And
well, I can understand that.
Obviously wanted to go around that, and we did not push our way in, because in the dream group you keep hands off if people don't want to talk about something. But what she found out what the dream meant anyway, without us sticking our nose into her private business.
Yeah.
So it works even when you
there are things that they're limited, and people don't want to go to certain places in their lives.
But also this thing about intimate and trust and intimate, when you get down, you need that to get down to where a dream is. You need that intimate revealing, because that's what dreams are about. They're very intimate. Their reality is seen by that one person who's dreaming it.
Yeah, but the more the person reaches for that, the more vulnerable they are, and the more quote potentially dangerous it is. And what's always amazing is that people say things like, I'm like this, or I'm too much like that, and nobody says, oh yeah, you're a bitch, or that's not very nice. And you never hear anybody say anything like that. And
the truth is, we're all like that. We're all human beings.
Exactly, and so it's really, that's the other thing that's, even after the first dream group, that was the thing that struck me very, very much. How people were trusting and felt safe in the group. That's the word. That they felt safe, and that they could say all kinds of very intimate things about themselves without being judged. Now, admittedly, all these people aren't in each other's lives. They're not. It's not like a group of people, that work with each other, and now they're in the dream group. That might get a little awkward. I don't know. There's maybe an advantage or a plus about having people not being real friends. They only meet in the dream group. It keeps that a little cleaner. But
I think you're right. I had a dream group class several years back, and it was a small class composed of majors in one department, and all their dreams, what they related it in terms of, was the badminton team that they were on. Nothing got personal, because they all knew each other, and they really did not want to expose themselves to each other. And it was sort of, for me, it was a failure of a class. It's shallow, stayed shallow all the semester, and that's not good.
Yeah, but you learn something. You learn that actually that's not a situation to apply this to, because the people are too close to each other, and they can't reveal those things. It's potentially not safe, because they'll go back out. People feel vulnerable, and I can tell a quick little story where there was this fellow at work, and he was asked to do a math calculation for a proper dose or something, and he really, they asked him to do it, but he wasn't capable of doing it actually, and somehow he trusted me, and he, so he came to me, and he gave me his calculation. He said, "Could you go over this?" And I started looking at it, and I couldn't understand a thing. And it didn't make any sense. So I figured it out, and I wrote it out for him, and I went back to him, and I handed it to him, and I said, "I was having a little trouble, getting your thing going, but you take a look at this, see if this works, And of course it did, and he thanked me, but it was a situation where he was willing to reveal his inability to do something, and in general, I created an atmosphere around myself where I was always helpful, and he trusted that I wasn't going to say at the next staff meeting, "Man, Tony gave me this this calculation for the dose. It was all messed up. The guy can't add two figures together. He's an idiot." that never happened. I said, here, use it. If it works, and so he handed it in over his hands, and I didn't care. But that's the kind of thing that cannot happen. If you find somebody who's going to be, nasty and competitive in a group of people, then you can't be honest and open in a thing like the dream group. It's too dangerous.
This is, you raise this point, and this guy from Australia, what he was doing is he was applying a beginner's take on the Montague-Ullman process. I mean, the rules are the rules. Montague-Ullman process has rules, specific rules.
Yeah.
And he was applying a beginner's take on those rules to people who were past masters at this. All the other people in the dream group were already masters at the process. And the master, like a master tennis player, they don't always follow the beginning rules. They improvise according to their intuition at the moment. And that's why they're hard to beat, because they'll do unexpected things. And we were doing that in the dream group. And I felt unsafe in my own dream group because he kept calling me down for violating the process when I was just leading the dream group the way a masterful person would lead it, not the way a beginner would lead it. And he was a beginner, but immediately set himself out to be the judge of other people in the group. Well, a beginner is the judge. Is not a judge of anybody, and that displays a neurotic personality tendency that doesn't work in the dream group. And someone like that you don't want in the dream group. And I just stopped inviting him to the dream group. He caused all amount of all kinds of trouble, and you just don't want neurotic people like that in the Ullman dream group. It's not about psychotherapy. It's not about that stuff, Well,
we had that incident. That guy who came once. I don't remember exactly what he did. He started mansplaining to us and pontificating, and it was the first time I ever saw you get mad at somebody. And it was, he had a dream, and then he started to try to manipulate everybody, and he wouldn't participate properly. And he was shielding himself and keeping things back and not really participating in a proper way. And I remember at some point you really went after him, and he never came back, and you wouldn't have brought him back. But it was the first time that I ever saw a dream group not work.
I wish I remembered who he was. There's so many dream groups that it just goes by.
No, it doesn't. Just as well, you don't remember who he was. Because even when you asked him to tell us about himself, he introduced himself as somebody who's extremely knowledgeable and smart about dreams.
Oh, I remember that guy. Yes. Oh, it was too much. That was too much, really. I mean, but what he's doing is common, I think, in many parts of the United States. It's all gotten into it's a head's approach, and he introduced himself as someone who's a past master at dreams, and no one could understand his feelings because the rest of the group was not up to his level. But the truth was, he was so far below the group's level that it was pathetic. And
no, he wasn't really participating. He wouldn't say. We were asking him questions he wouldn't tell. Anyway, that happens occasionally.
Exactly. I remember who that guy now. He only came once, and that was it. And then he wrote me a long email afterwards explaining why everybody was wrong and he was right.
That's very typical. That's typical of that kind of person, and it is the culture here.
It is the culture there.
There's a very, we if I think maybe I don't know, maybe it's changed some, but I just remember as a kid, you were always pitted against somebody else, and it was always trying to get a leg up, and there wasn't really an emphasis on camaraderie or helping each other, or there's an underlying competitive sense in the culture, and I think back to things that I did at work before I figured that out, or before I shouldn't even say I figured it out. I transformed. You talk about transforming. I transformed from being a bit too much like that to being, just different, to being helpful and learning and giving whatever I had, and not trying to protect myself. And that's. I used to teach people who worked for me. I would show them how to do my job so they could replace me, and it actually happened once or twice. and all it did was make me go do something else. I moved on. But anyway, that's a whole other topic.
What you're talking about, Arnie? This happened. This is happening to your work. This is called enlightenment, and Ian McGilchrist would call it moving from a left brain control to moving to ultimate right brain participation with the world around you. And Ullman has invented a culture in this dream group process that enables that kind of transition that you gave an example of. I went through that also in terms of my long 30 years in New York, and all the horrible experiences I had. They sort of transformed me, They sort of beat all the parts of me out that shouldn't be there, and left me sort of like you, the same mindset that you have. And I feel that may be real enlightenment, and not what people like Master Pi would teach, but this hocus pocus stuff. It's just
that's right.
It's a human being.
That's exactly right. The other story about this fellow Tony who had given me this math thing. He was in charge of the chemistry lab. The people they did chemistry analysis where I worked. And there was a woman there, Shara, and she ran the lab. And occasionally, if she had a problem, she would come and get me and ask me to help her with it. And I still, and I still remember being in the lab, and Tony walked in and saw me sitting there with a Shara. And on one level, she wouldn't go to him because he wouldn't have been able to help her. And he saw me in there, and he just turned around and walked out. So he didn't have to, confront the situation. But at the same time, that was part of making him feel safe, because I went in, I helped the sheriff figure out what was wrong, and I never said anything about it. I didn't talk to other people about it. I didn't say anything to him about it. So he was more trusting. He knew that I wasn't going to, stab him in the back, shall we say.
No, this is the very point of it. Like Ullman invented a culture. It's what he really did. He invented a way to change and to put trust to the fore, and openness and cooperation instead of competition. Trust instead of people jabbing like that Australian guy. You did it wrong. You didn't go by the rules. You know what I mean? Like as if a newcomer like him knew what the rules really meant.
Yeah, but it's but the process is so powerful.
Yes.
And it keeps you on track, as it were. You don't run off on a switch, and suddenly you're in the wrong place, and you've done some damage to the situation.
Yeah.
So I don't know how long it took him to come to that. I'm sure that it took him a while trying things out and doing this and participate, until he came up with this, which works.
But the thing is, the two answers to that question. One, during a course of a semester or so, he offered a course teaching medical interns in psychotherapy how to work with dreams. And instead of using the standard techniques that they always use, he invented this process where the dreamer herself made sense of the dream. So the short answer is that it doesn't take too long for him to invent it, but the long answer is his whole life. It's the kind of person he was. And he was a different kind of person. Very special. I wish you could have met him. He was a different kind of person. And he really was not in the American culture. He was something, he was really operated by a different set of standards than other people did. The sort of thing you described for yourself, he was sort of like that. And that's what he created a dream group that enabled that to evolve, to come out of the people, from ordinary people. We're all like that. And if we were like that in our work, in our society and everything, the world wouldn't be in the mess it is,
Well, you're already, you talk about him that way, but you are him now. And in a way, one of the things that, was Richard Green in the class, the black belt, the black guy? He was a little hefty. at Mr. Pies? Was he in the class when you were there, Richard Green?
I'm not exactly sure. He might have well have been. I can't remember
Yeah.
all the people. As I get older, my memory is not as strong.
Yeah. Anyway, Richard and I talk periodically, and he's even older than I am. And at some point he said, listen, he said, we're the masters. We're older than the guys the guys who taught us, you know, and he'll laugh, because he would talk about how people do the form, and some people get into, oh, does your hand have to be this way or is it going to be that way? And he was laughing, he said, that's not interesting, and we know that. And he and I talk a lot together about it because we're sort of in the same place. We have a certain understanding and an appreciation. But what he said was that we are the masters now. These other guys, they're not even around anymore, and we're the masters, and you are. You're one of the masters, and you've taken the Ullman thing, and I'm sure you're doing it your own unique way, and it's very successful, and people catch on quickly. Look at this little group that we had. After about 2 or 3 months, you started to get other people to run the group, to sort of teach people, let people, learn how to do it themselves and to run it themselves. And it's always interesting because it's a little different, when other people do it. And of course, you're still there, so you throw your usual, thoughts and guidance to it.
Well, the thing is that these people, they're better than me, all of them. When they lead the group, each of them does it in a way that's better than the way I do it. I can see that. And so this dream group we have, this international dream group, is really a masterclass in Ullman dream group leadership. But the thing is, they're not studying under me, the master. No, they are the masters. It's a masterclass because they are the masters, and they're allowed to.
But they're not necessarily doing it better than you. They're doing it in their own way, and that's something to appreciate. And then you realize, oh, that's interesting.
I learn when I see them do it. I learn their own way teaches me something. It's always around a master.
Yeah. Well, and these people have been doing it. It's a good group. We've been doing it for a while.
It's a good group.
I suddenly realized. I think we've been doing this for 2 years at least.
It's amazing the time went by. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I remember being up when I was up in the country with my daughter, and that was like 2 years ago. And I stayed up very late. Everybody went to sleep, and I took the computer and went out on the porch, and joined the dream group out there. So that was a long time ago.
Well, you are unique because a lot of these people come to this from psychology or social work or something like that, or self-improvement. But you're not into any of that stuff. You just come as who you are from the life you've led. As a real master, you were a black belt, one of the best in the karate class, kung fu, I guess it was. And but the thing is that mastery in that carries over to the dream work somehow. Somehow you are in the dream group like you were in that kung fu class. Nobody would want to tangle with you, because you're good. And always when you speak up, you come from a different point than anyone else because you're centered in yourself and you see things in a way that's true. And so you're really gold for the dream group, to tell you.
That's very nice. That's nice to say. I'm also well. Age does help, but there's a lot of stupid people who are old.
I know.
But it doesn't mean that you're going to get smarter or transform. You were talking about how we worked at that, but we were always pursuing things that were directed toward that.
Yeah, we were pursuing.
We were doing the meditation. All those years that you went to that thing in Queens, and I did all the martial arts stuff and the sitting and.
Exactly. I once said to Montague Ullman, I said to him, I said, Monty, why don't you meditate? Because it surprised me that he didn't. And he said,
well, the dream group was his meditation.
That's exactly what he told me. He said, Bill, he showed me his paper. He said, Bill, you see, I'm an inveterate doodler. He said, the only time I don't doodle is like what they call it, what are your thoughts in your head going on. The only time I don't doodle is in a dream group. And he said, in a dream group, I'm really there listening. And it's true. I'm the same way. You must be the same way. You're really listening, if you're doing it right, listening to what the dreamer's saying and listening to what the dreamer's not saying. It's so important to hear the dreamer. And by what a person says, they also reveal what they're not saying. And you don't need to dig into it to find it out. It's right there. And Montague Ullman where he said exactly what you said, that the dream group is meditation. It is a form of meditation like Zen. It really is. And a form of practice like karate. It really is it's so sad what it's turned into in so many places is some fringe thing, that only a few people do. This could change the world. This could, Ian McGilchrist has a book, which I'm just finishing now, really saying that the problem with the world, the reason this culture may collapse in maybe a few years, the climate, the environment is going to collapse. And with that, the civilization is going to collapse. It's because we're too left-brained. We're too into grabbing it to use it for ourselves, and we're not enough right brain, which is making it work for everybody and everything. So that the tigers and the trees and the water plants and the fish, they all thrive and are alive. We want to cut down the trees and catch the fish. You know what I mean? We want everything for us to make money. And
one of the keys to this, is one of the very basic tenets or things that the Zen people say is pay attention.
Pay attention. That's it. That's 100%. That's it. Now, I just want to say something now. The left brain and the right brain both pay attention, but in a different way. The left brain is attention. How can I use this? How can I use that person? How can I use that person to benefit myself? The right brain is different. It's not how can I use that person? How can I fit in with everything that's happening?
Well, it's looking at patterns and seeing how things interact and how they fit together.
It's like the Taoist, it's like the Zen masters,
But that's one of the admonitions that the Zen people are always pay attention. Let me respectfully remind you that life and death is of supreme importance. Life passes swiftly by and opportunity is lost. Wake up! Pay attention. Don't waste your life.
You're like fish with little water. I know, I remember all that. Anyway,
I remember that from
this because we're running. People won't watch it if it's too long. But I really enjoy it.
You can edit and take out the parts you don't want.
No, I don't know how to edit. I just put the whole thing in. Now, Arny, so I'll see you tomorrow then, okay?
Yeah, and I'll try to come in. You see, once things get, I'm not sure if it's the computer or the program. Maybe it's the computer. It's like warming up. You don't think you need that with a computer. It's just supposed to turn on and work. But this is a left brain computer, and it's not. It's right. Is it the right brain? Right brain computer. So it's a left brain computer. Doesn't want to just there's time to do this anyway. Yeah, I'll try to come in early.
Tomorrow. I've got to turn off now. Okay.
Okay. Good enough.
Thanks a lot for this. It's really valuable to hear what you say.
Yeah, well, it's always good to hear you too.